Hello, human peoples. You're listening to the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. To support us and gain access to great exclusive podcasts like Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and our latest show, Spiel Boys, head over to patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. We do game streaming, movie nights with our patrons every Friday night, and you can even commission your own podcast about anything you want. Literally anything, within reason, and we have to do it. You are quite frankly out of excuses not to go visit patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds.
Okay. That's it. That's my intro.
That's it? We're here. Intro successful.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
My name is David Bell.
My name is Tom Ryman.
And we just watched The Pentagon Wars.
Pentagon Wars.
Wars. Yeah, fuck it.
But even a heat-seeking missile can miss a target.
General, I see here that you taped electric hot plates to the surface of the vehicle to help your heat-seeking missile find its target, and that the temperature of the vehicle was so high that it could have fried an egg at 20 feet.
It's fired. There was a verifiable deviation from the standard test data accumulation.
Where are my Pentagoons at?
We should start a gang.
I think we technically have.
Yeah, you're right. It's more like a cult, Tom. Let's be honest.
There's some overlap.
Where am I? What's going on? Hey, big thank you to Burrito.
Thank you.
This is from them. They've been doing our shapes. You know our shapes?
Yeah,
and
sure.
A pentagon is a shape.
That's true. That's very clever. I was going to ask. This is a really random one to have requested.
It really is. I didn't know this movie existed.
I remember this. This was a made-for HBO movie that came out in 1998.
Max.
Well, it was HBO at the time.
Made for
scum.
Max. Okay, go on.
It was, I remember being, for some reason, I was weirdly excited for this movie. I thought it looked funny. I thought the story was a funny idea. I liked the actors in it. So I remember watching this when it premiered on HBO.
Wow.
I had this on, I taped it off of HBO.
Wow. This is Kelsey Grammer and Carrie Elways just having a smug off. The smuggiest smugs that ever smugged. It is loosely based on a true story.
Yes.
It is based on the memoir of a single person. I looked it up. I tend to, because I'm kind of biased this way, believe this movie probably more than I should. From what I can tell, there's a good chance a lot of this movie isn't actually as true as they want it to be. It actually came down in real life to a disagreement in testing mythology. But it's about the creation of Bradley?
The Bradley
tank?
Fighting vehicle.
It's
not a tank. That's the thing. It
was
supposed to be a troop transport to carry 11 soldiers. It's a light armor vehicle, but because of bureaucracy and the sort of circular thinking of it, it's actually kind of similar to it reminded me a little bit of Chernobyl, because it's the same, except obviously the stakes are different and this is a comedy, but it's the
about
same
bureaucracy,
right? It's the same sort of story about nobody in the chain of bureaucracy wanting to admit that they're wrong or to a mistake, because it will jeopardize their career and their chain in the
that's
and
what
the
it
bureaucracy.
is.
So yeah, it has become they're so entrenched in it. The premise of the movie is that these guys are so dug in that it has become absurd. The things that they do.
That's the thing is, I don't know how true this story is. I'm going to take it at face value, knowing that it might not be.
I know.
I did some research. I mean, we dumped. I mean, they do fix it at the end, so they are in battle and they're doing.
Yeah,
good.
they saw use in
the
the
montage
Persian Gulf,
of them designing it. There's been. It's hard because, as this movie points out, people are covering shit up. So when the army is like saying this isn't true, I'm like, yeah,
sure. Well,
says the army.
This came out,
you know, like
this takes place in the 80s, right? It's in the middle of the height of the Cold War.
Yeah.
The height of American spending. And there was like a famous story around this time in the 80s, not when this movie came out, but when the movie takes place, about malfeasance like that in defense contracts, where it was like it's the thing that like Judd Hirsch makes reference to in Independence Day. It was like, oh, you didn't think they spent $5,000 on a hammer, $10,000 on a nail, do you? There was something like that where a report came out where it was like, it was something like a seat on an aircraft. They said, oh, that was like $25 million or something. Like it was clear they were hiding money.
That's what I was getting to, is like whether or not this movie is exactly true. I do believe this is an expression of something that is happening in the military, and in other industries that I want to get to. I remember,
just real quick, I had another thing that I wanted to throw out. I remember us talking about it on Cracked. It was in a Cracked article, and it may have also made its way into the podcast, where there's like some factory that was producing vehicles for the Army, I think tanks, and they're still immediately into storage.
Yes, and that's still happening because it's an entire like economy is dependent on this shit.
The whole district's economy is dependent on this factory employing these people, so they keep giving money to make these tanks that we don't need, so these tanks are just immediately getting mothballed. Yeah. It's that level. This movie is about that.
It is.
Like, and that level of absurdity.
And you can take it a step further, which I believe is it was an article by Jason that was... I don't know if he worded it this way, pushing socialism a bit, because it was Jason making the argument like, hey, I got an idea. What if we just paid people to live? Yeah. And that's kind of what that is. Like, we're paying people to make tanks and then storing the tanks, because in our culture, it's unthinkable to just give those people money. Right. And that's like one of the main, this is more about the bureaucracy and the chain of command, people covering their asses, and that idea of like the machine must keep going. But it's all part of the same system, right? And the solution is really like, imagine if we could just, like automation, robots, these are all fine ideas. If we could just give people money to live and consume, there's nothing wrong with doing that. But we have decided that there's something shameful in that. So we have to like make up reasons for people to work. And this is all people trying to like maintain their jobs in the military. Mm-hmm. And this movie does a great job at showing like Kelsey Grammer lies to his boss, who also lies to his boss, who also lies to his boss, where it's like this chain of nobody wants to admit that what they're doing isn't like productive. It's
absurd. Like it's terribly inefficient. It's just an endless money pit. There's so much money involved. Like, all these people are friends with contractors that they then go and work for after they retire, and when Carrie Elway's first meets Kelsey Grammer, he walks into his office and Kelsey Grammer's on the phone talking about which senator's state they're going to build one wave of vehicles, because that's a thing. They go to states where people are favorable for them, so they can put the money into that district. It's all about the money. Yeah. And nobody wants to interrupt it. Yeah. So, man.
By the way, this movie, I really liked this movie.
Me too. I liked it a lot. Yeah. I think I made that clear. I was obsessed with this movie weirdly in high school. But I really enjoy this movie. I think it's very funny.
This movie, funny enough, by the way, I don't know if you noticed this, Tom. It's Sergeant Bilko. This movie is Sergeant Bilko.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just throwing that out there. It came out several years after Sergeant Bilko, but people were wondering, like, wait, what is the actual plot? It's Sergeant Bilko without like the over-the-top gambling stuff. It's the idea of these groups, they're faking a tank test
to get it to force it into. They're forcing a vehicle into production because they want the money, they need to stay on schedule, et cetera, but it's never been tested. And it's actively dangerous, and they do Kelsey Grammer is doing absurd things to sabotage the tests. Like, they're supposed to test. One test is supposed to see, he's like they're filling the gas tank with water and the ammunition inside with sand to prevent it from exploding. They're shooting it with like dummy RPG rounds that don't explode. Like,
the first thing that happens, Carrie Elways watches them shoot it, and it dents it, and then he goes and gets the munitions door and shoots it with the same missile, and it also just dents it.
Yeah.
So he realizes, like, oh, the tank is no better than the door
appears to be equally as strong as this door.
Yeah. And it's
and
lot
not
of
a tank.
bits like
it's not
that.
a tank. Yeah, it's not supposed to be.
It's not a tank. This movie, I would argue, is better than Sergeant Bilko.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason why is because I want to talk about the humor, because I think the humor is very well done, because it's not...
It's subtle.
I was going to say
this movie is very...
Yeah, I wanted to say it's not silly, but it is silly. It's not... No one in it is
But it's grounded,
unrealistic.
I think. Yeah, it's grounded. Even though it's about absurdity, it is grounded in a way that Bilko is not. Bilko's just a screwball comedy, pretty much.
Yeah. And Kelsey Grammer, who is the Bilko of this is one of his best performances, in my opinion.
He's really good in it.
He's extremely good, because what they're doing with him is so fucking funny. Because the idea of him, there's these moments where they put him under a microscope and he has to be asked these direct questions, and he finds ways to squirm through them.
Yeah.
And it's so funny to watch.
Yeah.
This movie is also like a little wish fulfillment. Not too much, because they admit that no one actually really gets in trouble.
Nobody got punished except for Cary Elwes. He was forced to retire early.
But it's cathartic in that it's like really showing this moment just getting ripped open. So Cary Elwes with pilot face plays a pilot because he has pilot face.
He does.
And there's also good reasons for him to play a pilot, because he's a man who is dependent on the vehicle he's in.
Yes.
And he's brought in separately, not under Kelsey Grammer's command, to make sure this tank is working out, because they've worked on it for a long time, and they need to roll it out.
All the flashback stuff with Richard Schiff is hilarious.
So good.
Where they keep
I want to spend a lot of time on that.
It's so good.
His assistant Viola Davis.
I know. Yeah, I didn't remember. Obviously, I didn't remember she was in this movie.
And so basically, at first, he's like taken aback by Sergeant Bilko, because Sergeant Bilko begins with the straight arrow joining the group, right? Like, it's Bilko. It's Bilko, Tom.
Yeah, it is Bilko.
Yeah. And so basically, Kelsey Grammer is like, he's very casual. He salutes him, and Kelsey Grammer does like a hand wave salute back. They're showing that Kelsey Grammer has just been in this for a long time. He likes his position. He's day drinking. He's chilling out. He's making deals. And he says to him, he's like, "You'll go far. You might be able to be a defense contractor here or defense." Yeah.
That first meeting scene is so good. Like, it tells us so much about him. Like you said, he barely does the salute anymore. He's immediately like, "Oh, I'm sorry you got stuck with this shit detail, but don't worry, we're a team here. I want you to consider me a friend. I'm on your side. We'll get through this for you." Like, and he gets him a drink, and he starts talking. He's pointing at a picture. It's like, "Hey, here's the last guy that had your position. He caught a huge marlin when I took him out fishing. And now he's working at a defense contractor I set him up with. And here's this other guy who's like a gazillionaire that he used to have your position, and I got him hooked up afterwards. So don't worry, this is a shit." Like, he keeps emphasizing that it's a shit detail, but don't worry, I'm on your side.
Yes.
It's also really great scene.
Yeah, it is. It's also, the whole thing is bookended by Kelsey Grammer clearly at a hearing. So it's going to end with him being caught. Yeah. Because he's explaining things. And like we said, the things he says later, he says, they're like, "Why wasn't there fuel in the tank when it was tested?" And he says, "Because if they were filled with fuel,
there's a good chance the vehicle would explode."
They would have exploded. And they're like, "I think that's the point, right?" But again, I do want to talk about, because the claim for real life is that it's about methodology, which is like the idea that like doing like loading the tank up and testing it is wasteful and expensive, whereas like controlled scientific tests are better. I don't know which is true. I'm not a science doctor. I'm not a science wizard. I'm not a science wizard.
I tend to think that if you want to see how a tank is how a vehicle like this, an armored vehicle, is going to withstand getting shot with an RPG, you shoot it with an RPG. You shoot it with an RPG with it loaded up the way it would be out in the field.
I agree.
With a full tank of gas and with all the ammunition on board.
Again, I am on Team Elwes.
That seems to make sense to me, because a dispute about methodology is the exact kind of bureaucratic speak that this movie is about.
You're right.
Like, because that's literally the argument Kelsey Grammer
makes. He rewrites
makes.
a report. He rewrites a report,
and it's in the hearing. It's the argument that Kelsey Grammer ultimately makes is that he and I are just having a dispute over the methodology of the tests.
Yeah. And it does seem like there's a lot of they're still pushing that idea, which is very funny. So what happens is the title, The Pentagon Wars, is essentially it's a small, quiet war of bureaucracy between these two people. Cary Elwes keeps trying desperately to test this tank.
He just wants. I love that too. That this movie.
That's all he wants to do.
The movie is building up. The thing the movie is building up to is finally getting to see this tank get shot for real. Like that's what it's all building up to.
And we'll get to that because it's cathartic. And that's it. That's the whole thing. And he keeps trying to test the tank in various ways, and they keep finding ways to fuck it up.
They learn that because the Bradley was originally. Oh man, I just wanted to go through some of the ways to describe how they thwart the test, but I was about to get into Richard Schiff's whole backstory, so I'll save that. But basically, it was originally meant to be just a light troop transport, but it got modified to hell, so it has all these guns on it, and that's a big-ass target, and it can't even carry that many troops anymore. It can only carry 6 now. It was supposed to carry 11. But the point is, because it wasn't designed to be a tank, it has aluminum armor. And so they find this report that the aluminum armor, when it burns, releases a toxic gas. So he stuffs it first with mannequins that are dressed in uniforms. And then they like John C. McGinley steals steals the fucking mannequins. They take the uniforms off of the mannequins and put them in a fireproof container, and then so they can present them. See, the clothes didn't burn. There's no chance of fire inside the vehicle, while somebody is quickly trying to drive away with all the scorched mannequins. Yeah. And then he puts sheep in there, and they steal the sheep. Like he has to chase them. And there's all these dead the military sheep on police. The back of this truck.
And a perfect summing it up is when Kelsey Grammer learns that he learned about the British test on aluminum. He's just curses the British because that's the really crass part of all this, right? Is like, this is about people's lives. It's about, and I want to get into that because they have a very good arc with that, about the fact that Cary Elwes cares about the fact that this thing will kill people. And Kelsey Grammer just cares about getting it into production. He's like, we'll fix it later, which I want to talk about in that montage part as well. And so they're doing this like back and forth. Like he asks for every piece of paper about the tank, so he gives him everything. A room full.
Thousands and thousands of files. Like they keep finding ways to thwart him. Like when he wants to buy the sheep, John C. McGinley creates like a sheep acquisition department that's just in there to roadblock him. Like, it'll take us 6 to 8 months to get the sheep specs, and then it'll take us another 6 to 8 months to get the sheeps for you. So he just goes and buys his own sheep.
And it's all about this like Brazil-esque bureaucratic war. When he shoots the fucking door, they get mad that he took the door off because they're like, "Sir, the munitions bunker can never be uncovered like this. That's a rule." Yeah. Like, so they use that against him, and it's just back and forth with paperwork.
That scene where McGinley's like, "Well, you destroyed the door," and it's like, "Well, it didn't get destroyed. That's the whole point." It's like, "Well, now it's all bent." And he's like, "Well, I'm not really worried about the door. I'm pointing out that this vehicle isn't safe." And he's like, "Well, who's going to pay to rehang this door?" Like, he's so focused on the door.
It's really good. Scene. And they keep doing that shit where, like, he writes a report basically saying that this thing really needs to be tested and all the tests are bad. Kelsey Grammer has it rewritten because there's no rule against that to, like, drown it in, like, weird doublespeak. So then Cary Elwes writes a memo that he's legally allowed to do to everybody, and he can legally send it to everybody remotely involved in the tank. Yeah. And they keep going back and forth like that. And it's delightful. Like, look at the absurdity without actually having anybody do like silly jokes. It's very silly,
and it's all just he just wants to shoot this tank for real and see if it, like, he just wants to test the tank, and it's all of this bureaucratic red tape and
I want to talk about
circular
that montage
logic
now
and
because
stuff.
I want to talk about, would you agree that this movie is perhaps written by a screenwriter, Tom? It was written by someone, right?
Well, yeah, yes.
Yeah, and that person is probably a screenwriter. I just want to point out that this movie spoke to me as someone who's tried to write things for studios, because this movie also feels like an analogy for bureaucracy across the board. And
yeah, of course.
In multiple jobs. Because the scene that you've been... If you want to go through the scene, because it's a delight, the development of the tank...
oh, man.
Is I'm pretty sure a metaphor for the development of a screenplay, or at least it sure felt like that way.
I think it's just universally true in these
just
situations
funny
where every
Kelsey Grammer, saying we'll fix it in the field is the equivalent of we'll fix it in post, right? It's like we got to write these Star Wars, we'll fix them in editing,
right? And Carrie Elways makes an argument later, or not the argument. He makes the analogy where he talks about the M16 and how the first M16s that went out were defective. They jammed all the time if they got a little bit wet or got some dust in them. So a lot of people were sent out into the field in Vietnam with these guns that didn't work, and a lot of people died as a result. Yeah. So yeah, that's like the fix it in post is pretty treacherous here. But yeah, I think it's just. Oh yeah. I think I'm sure that was on their mind. I think it just applies to every industry. Exactly. There's always somebody at the top that demands something without understanding what they're demanding or really what it is, and you have to appease those people. And
it's like a painting that always looks like it's looking at you. It's like, it's so good that I felt directly like spoken to by the tank development sequence, where I was like, that is what it's like being a writer. And I am imagining other people being like, that is what it is to do my job.
And Richard Schiff plays it so well. Like,
so basically, he slowly goes bald during the montage.
He does, yeah. He's like kind of losing his mind too. But basically, he's the colonel in charge of developing the Bradley, which it starts out like this flashback begins in 1969, and the movie takes place in 86. So he shows up to this meeting with 3 generals to show off the Bradley, which is finished. Like, he has the drawing, he has the blueprints, it's ready to go. He shows it to them. They're like, oh, this is great job. But then one of the generals says, could it be a scout vehicle? Because if we put this into production, I wouldn't have any money left for the scout vehicle I wanted. So couldn't this do both? And Richard Schiff is like, well, it's because it's fat. Like, the guy's like, well, it's fast enough to be a scout vehicle. And he's like, well, but it's a troop transport. It's pretty big. It's pretty conspicuous for reconnaissance work. Like, so it's like, well, just why not give it a big gun on top so it can protect itself from anybody who might shoot at it while it's doing reconnaissance. He's like, well, won't that make it more conspicuous? And then he puts like a big turret on it, and then they're like,
the turret is there because a scout has a turret, I think. And they're like,
that's right. He also points out you can't see out of it. If it's going to have a gun,
it might as well have a big gun on it.
That's right. Like, the reason is he points out it's conspicuous. They also can't see out of it because it's not designed for that. It's designed for there's a single manned machine gun on top that somebody's supposed to sit on, and really only the driver is supposed to be able to see because it's a troop transport.
Yeah.
It's the APC from Aliens, basically. That's all it's meant. It's got a gun, sure, but it's really just meant to carry people.
Yeah, it carries them in and out, and that's it.
That's it. That's all it's meant to do. But yeah, so he's like, well, they can't see. He's like, well, give a little turret up there so they can see around. And yeah, they're like, if it's a gun, it might as well be a big one. Yep. So he comes back with this huge cannon. They're like, why'd you put that huge cannon on there? Right. It makes it a target for the enemy.
Right. Well, no, first they're like, so for that big gun, he's like, how do we fit the ammo? And they can't. And they're like, well, remove some of the troop space.
Yep.
And he's like, so the troop transport, we want to remove some of the troops from it. And they're like, yeah. And then, then they're like, wow, they're going to shoot on it. They'll think it's a tank, even though we know it's not a tank. So they have to make it fucking, really strong.
They give it anti-tank missiles. Yep. So.
And they're also like, can it float? And he's like, no. And then they still try to make it aquatic.
They spend a lot. We find out later that they sink 4 of them trying to make it amphibious.
Yeah.
Like, they just, every time he comes back to them, like, it keeps showing him having these meetings where he's done exactly what they ask, and they're like, well, this cannon's too big, and like we need it. It's a big target, so you got to put missiles on it. And it shows him going back to his engineer, who's like, how is this going to work? I can't just squeeze ammo in here. It's like, well, we got to just lose troops, I guess. So now they have like it gets to the point where because it has. They also ask him to put in portals for little guns to be able to stick out and shoot. It gets to the point where between the tank and the machine gun that was originally on it, the cannon and the anti-tank missiles, it has to carry so much ammunition that it only has room for 6 people.
Yeah. So and they conclude, they're like, okay, so it's a scout. It's a scout.
That's too conspicuous for reconnaissance.
Vehicle, yeah. It's a troop transport that can't fit troops. Like it's all these
and
things
it's a tank
that it isn't.
It's a tank with aluminum armor.
Yeah. So it doesn't do a good job
like a
of
shell.
anything.
Like every time they do the test, the shell punches right through the tank.
Yeah. And that, again, I gotta say, I'm sure it's a metaphor for a lot of jobs, but it is a metaphor for why a lot of studio films aren't good, because it's exactly like
I think
I've had one experience with this.
It's every bureaucracy, like every industry that has a bureaucracy like this.
But it's perfect because it's like, the one experience I had with Studio Notes, it was literally at one point they were like, so we gave the script to 6 of our interns and here's all their notes. And I'm like, why do I need to follow 6 intern notes? They all contradict each other. And so what ends up happening is you make a movie, and people have watched many of these movies, that is trying to be so many things it ends up being none of those things. And that's exactly what this tank is, right? It's trying to be so many things that it can't do any of the things correctly. And that's just such a beautiful metaphor for making movies in a studio system where they're like, make it like Marvel, but also can you do this?
Yeah, you wind
also
up
like
making a movie for no one.
It's the Kevin Smith Superman story, right? Because there's also the person who's like, also throw in a spider because I just like that.
Because I want a spider. Yeah.
It's the same with like, can they shoot out? Give them little
portals
so
they can shoot out.
Yeah,
and then they don't even remember. Like when he comes back, it's like the same general who is Tom from Office Space. Is like, why the hell did you put portals on here? He's like, well, as per your request, we put portals in there so the guys could stick their guns out and shoot them. And then one of the other generals says, portals, what are we, the Navy? And then they all laugh. So like they don't even remember what they asked him to do.
And again, I've literally had that happen where they'd be like, you should make it like weird and funny. And then the next note is like, it's too weird and funny. Like, why is it like that? Like it's the perfect fucking like feedback by committee. Which, you're right. Again, other jobs have this. It's just, obviously, because this is about building a tank, about, like, that basic idea of, like, if you want to get anything done, you have a tight group of people who have a singular vision who agree to do this thing, right? And nothing gets done when it's, like, 6 people who all have different ideas and agendas. And it's perfect. And then just on top of the fact that Kelsey Grammer says we'll fix it in the field, it's like, oh God, this is how every movie is made now. Where it's like, oh yeah, let's make a Star War. We'll figure out the next ones later. Let's just like make this movie. It's got to have this and that, and it's got to have appeal to this and some kids, but it's got to be serious. But you got to have the legacy characters in it. And then, in post, they're like, man, this doesn't really work anymore. Let's like cut this scene out. Let's chop this. Like, it's just perfect bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And it spoke to me so in such a depressing way that I loved it.
Yeah, definitely. I see how it rings truer for industries where you're specifically making something as a team.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's like everybody has to have their input, and the thing becomes so different from what it was originally supposed to be.
Yeah, he says something like, it was going to be beautiful.
Yeah.
At the end.
Like, it gets to the point where, like, he starts in 69, like in that flashback scene, he walks in, it's finished. They agree to fund it. And then the movie takes place in 86. So it's been going on for 17 years at this point. And when they reveal, when they reveal that like they were trying to sell the Bradleys to the Israeli government, and the Israeli government was like, we don't want it the way it is. They demanded all these modifications to make it safer, but they were still producing the death trap version for American troops. Yeah. So you recognize that it's so shitty you can't actually sell it to anyone without modifying it, but you're keeping the unmodified death trap version for our own troops.
It's like, so perfectly counterproductive.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. Again, it's Brazil. It's like the little screens with the big magnifiers. It's showing how bureaucracy just like is absurdly counterproductive.
Gets so divorced from efficiency and from the task it was supposed to be accomplishing. Yeah.
And it's such a good view of that. And it's also done with some amazing performances. When Kelsey Grammer, so they have
he's
the
so
hearings.
Fucking funny in this movie.
Yeah.
Oh my god!
What happens is basically finally it all blows up in Kelsey Grammer's face.
Yeah.
Figuratively at first, and then literally later. We'll get to that. And he sits down with Congress, and we've been seeing the framing. The best part is when they ask him how much he spent, and he
mumbles through billion.
Well, at first he has no idea.
Yeah.
And that's the first.
His delivery of that when they ask him how much does this project cost, and he says how much. Like his delivery of it is perfect. Like he never considered the question.
It never occurred to him. And they're like, "How much is the taxpayer paying?" And he has to get the file, and he looks at it, and you could tell he's shocked, and he goes, 14.
14.
And they're like, million,
and he goes million.
Billion. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Olympia Dukakis, who's the head of the committee, is like, I'm sorry, what did you say? Did you say billion with the B?
And they're showing like this, him flinching at the lights of the cameras. And they're really showing this idea of like, they try to find what little justice there is in this story by explaining like, this guy is embarrassed. He is humiliated.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter ultimately, but
he still gets
he's humiliated.
Promoted, and he was already a general. Like you're that. He doesn't get much comeuppance, but they do enough to show that he is really made a fool in a public space in front of all these people. So
it's a little ahead of its time in that it's like we have a lot of this now, right? We have a lot of like, well, at least they were embarrassed, and it's like, they should have gone to jail, or they should have saw real consequences, but
somebody should have been court-martialed over it.
It's why people like gobble this shit up, because it's like we don't get anything else anymore.
Yeah.
And so like this, what we never did is the point of this movie. Like, that's kind of what's evident from this movie is like, no one ever really saw justice in any era here. Mm-hmm. Because this is like a fucking crime. But so that scene happens, and then so my only note against this film I made and then had to cross out. And it had to do with the grunts, the troops, because I was like, why are they listening to Kelsey Grammer? And it turns out, but it also turns out they weren't, because what happens is they do a very fun thing, and I really appreciated this. So they're going to finally test it. And it's like fucking, okay, I do want to talk about that sergeant when you're done with this bit. So I just wanted to put that out there. Because there's Which
a scene,
sergeant?
The main sergeant, the main grunt that he's kind of like buddying
he's
up
great.
With.
He's great.
He has a scene earlier that I really wanted to talk about. But
he says, continue. You guys, the people like you, we've gotten a bunch of you.
He really explains, because like Carrie always, like he reveals to him, like Carrie always discovers that there's water in the gas tank, and he asks the sergeant, who's kind of like the one of the troops that he's closest with or has the best rapport with. So he's like, Sergeant, is there anything else I don't know? And you see him kind of hesitate, and he goes like, the ammunition. So he takes him to the ammunition and shows him that all the ammo is filled with sand. And Carrie always starts laying into him. He's like, how the fuck could you do like this is court-martial stuff. Like you're endangering people's lives. Like, why do you do this? And he was like, how did you get such a shitty attitude? And he's like, well, I've been here for like years. I've seen you guys come and go. We're supposed to test this thing, but you forget about it. Like every one of these guys forgets about it and goes on to their promotion. And we're just constantly being told, like, I can't say no to a general. This is my orders I'm getting are from a general and from a colonel and shit. We have to just keep doing this. And everybody we see coming in who's like, I'm here thinking for the boys, the guys that are out in the field. I'm going to make sure this thing is safe for you guys to use. They always fuck off as soon as they get their next post or the next promotion. So like, he's totally jaded, and I thought that was it's a really good scene. It's a
really good scene. I'm glad you said that before we get to the next one, because that's also one that a lot of people can relate to. I remember I worked a job where they kept having middle managements come and being like, "We're gonna clean this place up," and then they vanish.
They never do. Yeah,
and you just kind of roll your eyes. But what he's doing is he's like, "Look, I won't lie when someone asks me a direct question, but I'm not gonna try to change things from where I am, and that's what's happening. He tells Carrie Elways whatever he needs to know, but he's basically like, "Listen, man, we get a new white knight every year."
Yeah, exactly. I'm in the Army. The General Kelsey Grammer or Colonel John C. McGinley tells me to do something. I gotta fucking do it.
And this is where the movie, where I was scared the movie was going to fuck up, and it didn't. It looked like it was going to drop the ball on purpose, because what happens is the night before the test, we get that M16 speech. Carrie Elways goes into the grunts' little quarters, and he's like, "Let me see an M16." And he explains that the first M16's misfired.
He shows up with Viola Davis, and they look at the Bradley and they see that it's been coated with a little bit of flame retardant. So he's like, "Oh, they've rigged the car." So,
they say is that flame.
They say is that flame. Yeah,
they don't know what it happened to it. Yeah,
yeah, he's suspicious.
And they walk in and all the grunts are clearly having just done.
Yeah, they're covered in like motor oil and stuff. Yeah. Like they've clearly done a lot of work.
And so he goes in and gives this big heroic speech about how you don't know anybody who would die because of something like this, right? Like, he basically gives the argument that we all kind of know, which is like, this is your lives on the line,
and your friends, and like this is all of us. Like, this is they're going to be human beings that and respect and love are going to be inside this car, like,
right? And it's like, why would you ever betray them and rig this thing to not? Because they assume it's been rigged to pass the test again.
Yeah,
and then he talks down to them and leaves. And I wrote the note. I was like, oh, that's kind of shitty, because those guys should know what Carrie. He's preaching to the choir. He's treating them like children. Yeah. And then the reveal is that they weren't doing the thing he thought. They were actually doing exactly what Carrie Elways wanted. They weren't rigging it at all. They were de-rigging it to be exactly what it would be in the field.
Yep.
And they reveal that afterwards. They're like, yeah, your speech, we didn't need your speech. We had already done that. Speech is really
great. We'd already fixed the car, so it was like it would normally
right, because
be.
they're like, what the fuck do you think? What do you think we are? It's great, because it takes the piss out of Carrie Elways as this savior, where it's like, no, man, we don't need you to tell us that.
But I liked that it allowed for both. It allowed.
Yeah, me too.
It allowed for both heroics. Obviously, the test wouldn't have happened if Carrie Elways hadn't risked his career, and ultimately he does lose his career. But
for
also,
sure,
the test wouldn't have gone off correctly if the guys hadn't decided to, hey, let's actually do this for real. Fuck what Kelsey Grammer is telling us. I don't want to get inside this goddamn thing.
It's so good. That was my only note was erased.
I love when they realize that the Bradley is normal. They're out there on the field, and the major, who is under John C. McGinley, he's an actor named Tom Wright, who you've probably recognized for a bunch of stuff.
He's in all the Army stuff.
He's in so many Army movies. He looks like Army guy. He's got Army face.
He does.
He's out there supervising the thing, and he asks the sergeant, he's like, so everything's cool, right? And he's like, yeah, everything. So how much gas?
He won't lie.
He won't lie. He's like, so how much gas is in the Bradley? Just enough to do those maneuvers, right? He's like, there's as much gas as it requires. And then he asks about the ammo, and he's like, the ammo is exactly what it would be, what you would expect it to be in the field. And then he realizes what that means, and starts frantically waving to the John C. McGinley, who tries to get Kelsey Grammer's attention. As he's doing this big bombastic speech about how much the Bradley rules.
Yeah, he's like, remember, picture the enemy shooting at this.
And this is on our side. This is going to be full of our boys.
He really thinks he's going to pass because he thought he rigged it.
He thought he rigged it, yeah.
And then the most cathartic part of the movie happens. They finally shoot it, and the tank explodes exactly like you assumed. It completely explodes.
There is nothing left of it.
Yeah, they spend a lot of money on that explosion.
It completely explodes.
And all the Army guys cheer, and it's so cathartic to watch this thing fucking detonate the way you've suspected it would the whole time.
They've been really edging you with it the whole movie. The whole movie has been building up to seeing this fucking thing get shot and explode, because it's going to explode.
Oh yeah, and it's just it's a very satisfying movie for that reason. The movie is weirdly joyful, even though again it's very cynical because what the last thing that happens, they say Carrie Elways left
but
because
he was forced to retire, but the Bradley was modified.
It was modified, yes. We sent a bunch to Ukraine recently, and I was like, okay, well, surely it works in combat if we're sending it to.
So, I think it's a little cynical, but it is. I think it's more. It's
about the idea. At its core, that was the other thing I want to talk about with the screenwriting analogy, because at the end, Richard Schiff, they're like, "Good job, you're promoted." And that's, again, the whole thing where you look at people like J.J. Abrams, which is like, listen, take our notes, make the impossible shit movie, and you know what? We'll promote you. That's the ultimate thing, right? Part of the bureaucracy.
They tell him, great job, general. And he's like, general? Like, he's a colonel, and then they made him a general. That's like a big fucking deal. So, like, that's exactly how it's how it happens.
It's the mediocrity of this process, which is like, don't ask questions, don't try to make it good. Just do the thing we want, and then move on and get your money. And that's the whole idea. And so what they're showing is one person, Carrie Elways, risking their career to actually make a difference and make something of quality. And the silver lining is like, and that thing got made, which is more than a silver lining. It saved lives.
Right. It was his goal. I think the movie is just realistic about it, and I appreciate that.
Yeah,
where it's like,
I do too.
Listen, we knew this was the cost. This is why Richard Schiff was only willing to do so much to help Carrie Elways, because he was ultimately not willing to risk his career. But Carrie Elways was, and he loses his career. He is forced to retire. But he knew he was doing that. Like, he knew he was staking his career on making this change so that a bunch of American soldiers didn't die.
Yeah, and then Kelsey Grammer and his grunts all get promoted.
They all get promoted. So it's like it's a bitter pill, but it's also like, well, he did do the right thing, and he was successful. He was rewarded in the sense that the thing that he wanted to do, save people by showing that this vehicle was unsafe, got done.
The parts that's clearly like the Hollywood of it all is like, the tank at the end. It's the cathartic ending.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of stuff where it's like, again, I do believe, like the Richard Schiff stuff, this was based off a memoir. He couldn't have known that. You know what I mean? Like it's obviously exaggerated. It's the Apollo 13 of it all, which is like, I don't disbelieve this happened, but they're Hollywooding it up to an extreme extent, right? They're making everybody say just the right things, just the funniest versions. It's all the most ironic or like...
Oh, of course.
Snarky version where it's like, it's probably a little
right.
More
it's one of those things where
maybe the testing was in a different order. Maybe there was, like the lines where he's like, it would have exploded with gas in it are probably like very wish fulfillment. You know what I mean? It's I don't think it's that far off because, wilder things have been said in hearings.
We see this stuff all the time.
Yeah, exactly. But really, it's definitely a polished up Hollywood version
of
this story.
Of course, yeah. I have no doubt that this basic thing happened, but like it doesn't. And anyway, I'm not treating this movie as like a chronicle of history. It's more a comment on the way it's a very good military-industrial complex works, and consequently how this country works, and it is a very good comment. Yeah,
and that's what it is. Where it's like, I don't even know how this played out specifically, but I do believe that this is what happens more or less behind the scenes, right? Like this is a perfect caricature of this process that is terrifying and awful. And it's a very good movie and a very good performances. I do believe, aside from Sideshow Bob, this is Kelsey Grammer's best foolish villain, hands down.
Might be, except for his, of course, his unforgettable performance in Money Plane.
Money Plane, yes, that's true. There is Money Plane.
It's always Money Plane, Dave.
Kelsey Grammer, he's not bad. He's not a bad comedic actor.
Kelsey Grammer's a good actor,
yeah. He might not have some great opinions, but there's a reason he's still working. Is because he's good at what he does.
Yeah.
There's the reason he gets that Money Plane cash.
Yep.
Money Plane.
Fucking Money Plane cash.
I forget if I had anything else to say about this movie.
I think I covered everything that I wanted to talk about. So
yeah, other than that, it was generally good and like. I don't know. I mean, we just sort of explained the entire fucking movie to people, but I would say go watch it. It's fun and cathartic. It's Sergeant Bilko, man. It's Sergeant Bilko.
Yeah,
what more is there?
It's quietly funny, but it is very funny, and it's
not enough Viola Davis, but they didn't know what they had at the time, so
she's in it a lot more than I expected.
Oh yeah,
because I've remembered the character. I didn't remember it was her playing the character, but yeah, she's in most of the movie.
She is. She really is. But they don't know, like
they don't know she's Viola Davis. Yeah, so
she could have played Kelsey Grammer's role. I mean, again, Kelsey Grammer did great. So
yeah, he's so funny in this, man. Like when he's in the scenes where he's explaining to the Secretary of Defense, like he does like this chuckling and like this big shit-eating grin when it's such a funny performance.
It's a real Jack. It's like a funny Jack Nicholson and A Few Good Men, where it's like there's this hubris to him, where it's like he doesn't. Again, when they also ask how long they've been doing it, and it's like 17 years. And again, it never even occurs to him, that question. So it's like the hubris is so intense that like these basic questions like throw him off completely. It's perfect.
Yeah, it's funny. Like he's so used to obfuscating the reports, because like every time they ask him a question about the Bradley or about any of the other weapons that he's sort of fudged tests on, he effortlessly slides into bullshit.
Yeah, he's also used to like meetings where it's okay, where like his boss is like, I don't want you to tell me anything's bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just get it done.
Yeah.
So, but when he's actually asked a question, like a very basic question like that, he has no response.
Yeah, that's the fun part. It's something that, again, something we get out of life every now and then with a lot of these liars that we've been dealing with, which is like every now and then they have to like go to court and talk to some very serious people who are like asking them very serious questions, and they can't lie.
Yeah, listening to the Alex Jones depositions on Knowledge Fight has been extremely cathartic, because he's just it's what you're saying. It's a fucking fool suddenly forced to sit in a room full of extremely serious people and explain himself.
Yeah, that's
and
what
let me
this
tell you,
movie
Dave,
has.
He's not great at it.
No, it's Marjorie Taylor Greene had the other one.
Yep.
Where and you realize like, oh, they're completely full of shit.
Yeah.
And it's nice to finally hear it. It's not much, it's not enough, but it's nice. And so there's a lot of that in this. Even though this is wish fulfillment in the sense that, like, again, I'm sure you could find
a little bit.
Hearings.
It's not as wish fulfillment as like an Aaron Sorkin. I think it's very realistic in its portrayal.
I didn't get any of that, like the Sorkin-esque from it.
No, not at all.
I didn't get any of the, and then they all clapped, because they do that in a way. But then they also say like, yeah, and like, no one actually got in trouble. Like they make a note to be like, yeah, this was fun, but no one got in trouble for this really, and that's fucked up. So like that's the thing that Sorkin always kind of avoids. Sometimes he mentions it a little bit, but like it felt more, and it wasn't just like an afterthought. It wasn't just like freeze frame. Here's text of what happened. It's throughout. Like you kind of know, like, oh, they're not going to get in trouble. Like the tone of the movie is like they're not going to get in trouble.
Of course not. No, he's a general.
The Sorkin version is him like in handcuffs.
Yeah.
Him like being let out in handcuffs, and then like freeze frame. He wasn't actually in trouble. Okay, movie bye. Bye. I think Trial of the Chicago 18 or whatever, 7. I almost got the number. That's like one of the more egregious ones. But did you see that movie that really ends with and then everyone clapped? It's a really bad one.
Yeah, I had no energy for it at the time. It came out during the pandemic, and I just didn't need Sorkin's brand of wish fulfillment at that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what this movie is, I think. It's Sorkin, but not annoying.
Like I said a few times, it feels more honest. It feels more realistic. Where it was like,
it's honest Sorkin.
He staked his career on it. He accomplished his goal, but he did lose his career, and nobody was punished for it.
Yeah, like hey, it's pretty good. It's not great. It's all right.
I think it's important to tell those stories, because that's the point of having the sort of character and conviction to do a thing like that, where you are, if all of your movies are telling you that you're going to win the fight because you're right, that's not helpful.
No,
even though
unhelpful.
we like to see that in our stories. So I appreciate that they decided to tell a story that is triumphant, but is also grounded in the sense that, yeah, he paid a cost to do this because he's up against insurmountable forces. Like, he got a victory, but he lost his career. He lost his career in the military.
I agree.
So it's like, I appreciate that, and I think that's a cool thing to do as a filmmaker is to pick a story like this and tell it in a way that still covers all the bases. It's still funny. It's still absurd. It still has all the beats that you'd want from a movie like this, but it still manages to be honest about it and not like super saccharine or unrealistic or corny like a Sorkin movie.
Like a Sorkin. Yeah, you were right to be excited for this movie randomly in the 90s.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't explain it. I was 15 at the time. Don't know why 15-year-old Tom saw the commercials for this movie and was like, this movie looks like my fucking shit. I can't wait to watch it. And I taped it, Dave. I taped it off of HBO.
It's because every night that year, Kelsey Grammer crawled into your room while you slept and whispered in your ear,
The Pentagon Wars.
The Pentagon Wars on HBO. That was their marketing for this. That's how they marketed
it. Yeah, they spent a fortune on sending Kelsey Grammer all across the country.
Yeah, like
to
Santa
break
Claus.
into people's houses like Santa Claus. Oh, man. If I found out that Kelsey Grammer was Santa, I don't think that would be that surprising.
No, not at all.
Like if I heard a clatter and I came out to see what was the matter and I saw Kelsey Grammer putting a little fire truck underneath the tree, I wouldn't be that shocked.
Yep. And then he starts like, ranting to you about taxes or something.
Yeah, he starts doing some fucking weird bullshit rant. I'd be like, yeah, that checks out. I figured Santa would probably be a little cracked.
Yeah, starts talking about how the dog in Frasier he was a better actor than the dog. That's a true Kelsey Grammer story.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I can understand why like an actor like Kelsey Grammer would be frustrated by the dog on that show.
Yeah, I guess I can understand, but let me tell you, if I was on that set, I would feed his frustration. I would constantly feed the war, the feud, because it's very funny.
It's extremely funny.
Yeah, I'd accidentally like send him the fan mail the dog's getting. You go like, "Oops, sorry, sir. That's not for you. That's for the dog." I'd write fake fan mail, telling the dog that it's the best actor. I wouldn't rest until Kelsey Grammer killed the dog on the set of Frasier. That's what I'm really getting at here.
With his bare hands.
With his bare hands. Yeah. Because he could do it.
I have no doubt.
Yeah.
I don't have anything else to say about this movie. It's great.
It's great. Burrito, thank you so much. So much for, I mean, I had never fucking heard of this movie before. So, this is a delight. A delight. So thank you. This was through our Patreon.
Yes.
Patreon.com/gamefully unemployed. GAMEFULLY unemployed. We have exclusive podcasts on there like Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Fox Mulder's Maniac, Star Trek The Next Futurama, Spiel Boys. We watch movies every Friday night with our patrons.
We sure do.
We just watched episodes, custom podcasts in general, a nice little Discord community, lots of stuff.
Great Discord community. Yeah. We also have a store. Head over to gamefullyunemployed.com where you can find a link to our Teespring store. We have all kinds of cool original artwork and designs you can get on t-shirts, mugs, stickers, posters, all sorts of things. So slap your little Sorkin peepers onto that, I guess.
Do it.
Do it.
Do it, you fucking freaks. Sorry, everyone. I went too far.
You went aggressive. You got real aggressive with it.
I'll be better.
You were channeling Kelsey Grammer's character.
I was channeling
you were
Kelsey
channeling
Grammer's
Kelsey
dog rage.
Grammer. Yeah, basically, not his character, just the man himself.
Yeah, watch out for Kelsey Grammer. If you see him, watch out for him.
He doesn't look like he hasn't killed a man.
Yeah. Yeah, he looks like I don't know. He looks like he'd arm wrestle you to death.
Yeah, something.
Yeah, absolutely something.